Wonderful. So welcome everybody. I want to introduce you to Mobilise first of all before we get started. Mobilise is a tech startup, which means we're online and we provide carer support. We are by carers for carers. And we're working with Camden Council and Camden Carers at the moment to extend the reach of carer support in the borough and to extend the awareness of carer support that is needed out there, particularly since coronavirus and lockdown. So I'm Claire Cook and I am part of the Mobilise team. I am an NLP practitioner, so you see some of my blogs and vlogs that support our community in terms of mindset management. And I also host one of our virtual cuppas. And I'm joined today by Suzanne, who hopefully is going to pop on the screen. Aha, that's it, magic. Suzanne is head of carer support at Mobilise. So if you'd like to introduce yourself as well, Suzanne.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so I'm Suzanne Bourne. I'm head of carer support here at Mobilise, which means that I do all sorts of things connecting us with carers. So I host the one-to-one calls as a carers coach, offering support for whatever people need support with. And I host our daily cuppas, where people come together online to chat to other carers at a number of different times throughout the day, throughout the week. Claire does one of those with us as well. And yeah, I'm there in the background answering emails, creating content and blogs, listening to carers to understand what they want and sharing that back with other carers, sharing what we're learning and how carers are getting through this whole situation. It's been great. It's been a really busy time through the coronavirus situation, and we've been chatting to lots of carers, and it's been really great getting to know people.
Yeah, it has. Thank you, Suzanne. Some of you may actually have met me. I know that we have a few of our outreach organisations, as we've called them, who are working on the ground in Camden, and I've done a lot of the outreach work. So it's been great getting to know the organisations that are working directly with the people in the borough. So if you've already met me before, hello again. And if you're new, welcome as well. So objectives for today. Have we got a slide? Yeah. There we go. Seamless. So objectives for today are how to spot and identify a carer. You know, there's traditional carers like myself and Suzanne, and we'll probably cover our carer stories as we go through this. We're both carers ourselves. And there are people who are new to caring, and particularly since the pandemic, there's been a huge growth in carers. So we're going to talk about how we spot and identify carers of all types. How to open a sensitive conversation around their needs, and we'll discuss how opening these conversations can be quite triggering and difficult. And we talk about the kind of services that you can signpost carers to, services on the ground with the likes of Camden Carers and the local organisations that I've been doing outreach with, and services that Mobilise provide online. And the overall purpose of today is really to bring carers to the forefront of our minds. So to get our carer radar on when we're going out and we're working with people in the community, that we are keen at, you know, we're tuned in to spot them. Because as we would discuss through today, there are very valid reasons why carers will need support at different times. So we're going to start with some statistics just to give you a scale of some of the stuff that carers have going on. So 48% of us have taken on a caring role or support role since the pandemic. Now that's like 32 million people, almost 1 in 2 people. And a lot of these roles will have started as maybe helping a neighbour or an elderly parent with the shopping and the prescriptions, and they have grown. You know, we're 6 months on now, and a lot of this caring roles that started as favours and as a temporary measure when we were, you know, reacting to a situation, have carried on and grown. And it's about supporting those people as well before they reach a crisis point or a breakdown. 72% of carers have suffered from poor mental health. Now, this is not a direct comparison. These are different surveys, but if you compare that to the statistics that say that 1 in 4 people of the general population have experienced poor mental health and 1 in 6 have experienced prolonged periods of poor mental health, 72% is a significant number and is very telling about the strain that the caring role can put on people. And finally, 80% of carers have felt lonely or socially isolated. And this statistic was taken before lockdown. So three very sort of compelling stats just to highlight why it's so important that we do raise the profile of carers and we can learn to identify, spot them and support them. So moving on. So what is an unpaid carer? Now, at Mobilise, and these are Mobilise terms, they're not, you know, they're not terms that are necessarily used elsewhere, but we've been categorising the type of care that there may be. There are what we've called traditional carers. So I would probably class myself in this bracket. We're quite easy to spot. I have a daughter who has complex lifelong needs, a learning disability, autism, sensory processing disorder. She's 24/7 care. I'm a traditional carer, okay? And then there are what we've termed moments of care carers. And these are people that are possibly newer to caring. And we're going to talk about those in more detail as we go through. So if we can just go back up a slide, please, Suzanne. Thank you. So traditional view, like I said, that's myself. It's probably Suzanne. Suzanne, I don't know if you want to come on and talk about your caring role as well in terms of this. But quite often you are living with the person that you care for. It's quite obvious. You quite likely, if you are in contact with these people, they may have already approached you because of their caring role, rather than an indirect way in. So what about yourself, Suzanne?
So I'm caring for my husband, Matt, who was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease 17 years ago. So for us, it's been a real slow transition. For the first 5 years, I wouldn't have called myself a carer, not just out of pride or anything, but just didn't even know the word, that it was a term that existed. And it wasn't until I got into doing some volunteering to support people with Parkinson's that someone, oh, so you're a carer of someone with Parkinson's. And I did that classic, no, I'm his wife. And eventually kind of realized that, yeah, I'm wearing both hats. I'm wife, I'm mum, I'm carer. So we live together. We're a married couple, and I support him day to day with personal care, getting out and about, sort of confidence, telephone calls, medical appointments, getting organized and those sorts of things. And at other times he carries on with life quite independently. Parkinson's is one of those things, it's very varied. So I'm not a 24/7 carer, certainly. But yeah, I think I'm quite typical of a lot of the carers that we're seeing at Mobilise. They have a big caring role in their life, but there's lots more to them as well.
Exactly that. We are more than just the carer. Thank you, Suzanne. And I think it's really important. So what you say that you hadn't recognised yourself as a carer for a while, and this is very true. I think even of people in, I have a 24/7, a daughter that requires 24/7 care, but for many, many years, I didn't recognize the title carer, not deliberately or consciously, but I was her mum, and I still am her mum. She's my little girl, she's 11 years old and I'm her mum. But there are many reasons, beneficial reasons, to sort of acknowledging the carer role and accepting that actually it's a huge amount of responsibility, work, emotional investment, and so on. So and we will talk about the word carer and how people may or may not like the word, respond to the word as we go through. And I just wanted to pause quickly just to say thank you for all the questions that came through on the type form, and hopefully many of those will be answered as we go through the presentation, and any that aren't, we will be doing a follow-up email to this, and wherever possible, we will obviously come back to you on the questions that have been raised. Feel free to please drop questions in the comments as we go on, as we go through. That's absolutely fine as well. Again, you may not get answered immediately, but we will get back to you. Lovely. And if anyone would like to share what your role is in the community, that would be wonderful as well, so we can get a feel for the types of people that you're interacting with on a daily basis. So we've looked at the traditional view, if you like, the classic view of a carer. And perhaps the bigger focus of this presentation is actually the moments of care carers, the people that are largely new to this since the coronavirus. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking, the post has just arrived. So Many are new since coronavirus. They are less likely to be living with the person they are supporting, but this isn't exclusively the case. It may be that they've moved an elderly parent in with them because of the pandemic, and that situation has continued. But many of these people started out, they may even consider themselves volunteers. They may be doing favours, but obviously 6 months has passed, and that's a long time. And we are very aware that making people aware of support that is available before they reach crisis point is the way to go. So if we move on, there are, and also 48%, let's remind ourselves of that statistic, 48% of us have been providing some level of care since the pandemic. You may even start to recognize yourself as we go through this in more detail. So how do we spot the moments of carers? So we have a little slide for this for you. Lovely. Oh, look, I've gone big. There we go. So spotting a moments of care carer. So things to have on your radar. Are they getting shopping and prescriptions for someone? And we're talking about on a regular, consistent basis, daily, weekly. Are they supporting someone to leave their house? Are they phoning and visiting to provide emotional support? Are they preparing meals and cleaning, supporting with personal care even? And I suppose for me, the two telling questions really are, when they're planning their own days, are they having to consider this other person's needs in that? If they're planning a day out, are they having to think, well, actually, that's the time I would be doing, I would pop in to check they're dressed, or if they need any shopping, or, so it becomes part of their mindset when they're planning their days. And finally, could the person they support cope if that support was withdrawn? And I'm wondering if going through that list, if it's triggering ideas, people in your community that you work with. And again, it might not be the person that you are working directly with, depending what your role is. But if you're, say, supporting someone with mental health difficulties, challenges, it's quite likely that there is someone in their close family unit or friendship circle that is providing care for them, that is an important part of their support network. And it's spotting them and opening up those conversations to check that they are getting the support that they need. It's really, well, let's go on. Why it's so important to support the carer. And obviously, if you are supporting someone with poor mental health and their carer or carers, their family members, aren't getting the support they need, then actually the whole unit starts to be jeopardized and be at risk. So I love this quote, and it resonates with me personally, because as a carer, I did put my needs aside for many, many years, and it doesn't lead anywhere positive. But when you really, really take this quote on board, it makes a big difference. A carer's needs are as important as the cared for, if the relationship is to remain healthy and sustainable. And the reason I say that is, if I were to employ a carer, a paid carer to look after my daughter, do I think a paid carer that's had no sleep, no breaks, no time to themselves, do I think they're going to be able to provide good care for my daughter? Would I want them to provide care for my daughter? And the answer is no, because you can't care from a place of lack, not forever. And believe me, you can go for some time, but it's not healthy. And you see a lot of carers developing chronic health conditions as a result of running on adrenaline and stress hormone cortisol for so long. So it's just really to build the emphasis on why we do what we do, and why we're talking to you today, to raise the profile and get those carer spotlights shining in your network, so that we can capture everybody at the right moment for them. So how much of a problem is it if we're not identifying and supporting carers? You know, so like I said, if we're missing them, what's happening? And we've got some more statistics just to share with you. But Suzanne, I was going to bring Suzanne back here. I mean, these statistics are pretty, you know, they speak for themselves. But what we wanted to do was talk around these statistics and say, what does this actually look like for a carer? You know, there's 72% of carers suffer from poor mental health, 61% with physical ill health. How does this happen, I suppose is the question.
Well, I guess when you chat to carers daily, trying to get them onto the topic of themselves is really quite difficult. They will talk about their cared for and their situation and the things that the person they're caring for needs. And quite often that's where they're focused. If you ask that simple question of how are you, it's a great question to ask a carer, and quite nice to ask it ahead of asking about the person they care for. But you'll sometimes need to ask it a couple of times or put it in different ways to really find out a little bit more about how they're actually doing, so they don't brush that question off. One thing I notice is that a lot of carers put off going to see the GP for themselves. They see it as a lower priority. And through the pandemic, they've also had this perception that doctors are really busy and that perhaps also the doctor's surgery is a dangerous place to be. And so it's been quite important to encourage carers to, you know, use the e-systems for booking in, use 111, that, you know, that healthcare is still out there for them and that they are really important. And now more than ever, looking after their own physical and mental health is really important. When we chat to carers, quite often they've had some mental health illness in the past and maybe noticing that it's coming back. Quite often they know where to go to for further support, but maybe have that impression again that it's not available. You know, we'll make that assumption before going to find out. So it's important to encourage people to test that out and see if that's true. But quite often, you know, just that starting point of the GP, whether it's physical or mental health, is really important to let them know that they're that's absolutely important. In terms of isolation and loneliness, obviously with the pandemic and with lockdown, things happen very quickly and lots of support groups closed, lots of informal meetups over coffee, and even just chatting to people in the waiting room when you're going off to an appointment and things like that. So much of that stuff stopped. So we've really noticed those that have been joining our virtual cuppas have really embraced the idea of making a whole bunch of new friends, getting to know some new people. But it's a big step to come in. You know, people are kind of sit on the edge for a while before they really dive into it. And we get that. And the cuppas aren't for everybody. But lots of people have really, you know, once they get going, some people have been there every day. And that's absolutely what they've needed through this period of time, to know that for half an hour a day, they can chat to others, focus on themselves. So, yeah, and absolutely those sort of financial implications of caring. And, you know, carers quite often won't want to stop and take a look ahead at the future because it looks scary. It looks like there's nothing that can be done about it. So, again, it's that kind of, come on, let's be brave. Let's take a step back. Let's learn from others. What have they found that helps? Those sorts of things. So a lot of carers have been saying, come on, have you had a carers assessment? And have you sort of seen this charity that provide grants for your specific situation? Have you had the OT come in and have a look at the assess what's going on? At least have a phone call with them to get yourselves on their list and things like that. So we see carers encouraging each other to start to resolve some of these problems, to sort of not become one of these statistics. And absolutely, through coronavirus situations, so many services shut down. We're so excited in Camden Carer Service were up and running within days, despite having moved offices. They, you know, what they've done to work from home and get online stuff running has been fantastic. That's not been the same picture throughout the country. So it's been really great working alongside them and seeing what they're doing and adding to that support.
Yeah, absolutely, Suzanne. Absolutely. So, yeah, lots of options, which can't be said across the country, actually. I was thinking about the social isolation and loneliness one, and these statistics are from before the pandemic. And, you know, I think, you know, a lot of carers perhaps missed those accidental social points during the day. So school runs or walks to the doctors or whatever, you know, things that where you're almost forced to be sociable because you're out. Whereas if you're left your own devices to be sociable, it's a big step sometimes if you're not in a good headspace. So you can recede further and further back. And also the struggling to make ends meet. I know from a lot of the support calls I've had in the borough, or some of the support calls I've had in the borough, that the impact on your ability to work and continue working when you are also caring for someone who has complex needs or disability is impacted greater. And we've spoken to people that have been basically at home, unable to work and at risk of losing their jobs now. So I would be very mindful of that going forward. As we are seemingly coming out of lockdown, the same can't be said for people that are caring. There's a lot of families that are feeling left behind because they're shielding someone with a medical vulnerability, or they just feel plain nervous because the impact of a carer or the person they support of being ill is huge. Some of these people have no support network. If the carer, so I think as we step forward, let's be mindful of the fact that things may seemingly be opening up, but not in the same way in the caring community. So there you go. Thank you, Suzanne. So there are various barriers to accessing carer support that we wanted to talk about, and these are personal to each person, and this is not a full list, but it gives you an idea, a flavour of some of the reasons why, if you do approach someone about their caring situation, the kind of resistance that you may meet. And we go on to talk about the emotional barriers that and emotions that you may trigger as well. So some of the typical barriers. Not everyone wants to be called a carer. Not everyone recognises it, accepts it. Sometimes this is, well, it's down to beliefs at the end of the day. Beliefs around, I thought I was mum, just mum. But also culturally, what we're finding from talking to lots of people in the Camden Borough is that there are cultural expectations about your role that don't necessarily allow you to identify as a carer or seek help. So your mum, your daughter, your dad, your brother, your auntie, you have a role and you step up and deliver it. And sometimes various different cultural responses can prohibit you feeling that you are able to identify as a carer and access support. So, and we need to be very mindful and respectful of that and work sensitively. Some people would be embarrassed to admit that they need help. Feelings of inadequacy. I know this was me running on adrenaline and cortisol for years. Just go, 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 go. Everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine. And what you're doing is just sort of building a dam to hold back a lot of emotions that are bubbling away really below the surface. But your way of coping is to say it's fine. And you can present and show up really well. I know, I did it. You can show up like you are in very much control. So it's keeping an eye on those people. And they're not going to access support until they're ready for it. But it's letting them know that you're there. And not wanting people or strangers to poke their noses in. And again, culturally, there will be different responses to this. But I know that I found that very hard. When we finally conceded that we needed respite for our daughter, that meant having a social worker in our lives. And I had no experience of social workers except a perception that they were only involved when there was neglect. So I went into this, I felt awful, So it was a huge step to have someone come into my house and hear our whole story. And you do get more comfortable with it. I will never say it's, I like it, but you do get more comfortable with it. But I will always remember how awful that was to start with. And it's not just a social worker. I've had lots of people come into our house to help me because I realized we needed help. But it's tough they start off as strangers, come in to help you look after your daughter. It's tough. Everyone knowing your business, hearing when your other child kicks off and has an argument with you. You have people in your life. It can be, it's an adjustment, and it takes different people, different amounts of time to accept it. A feeling of letting down the person you support. Okay. And also when you know that the person you support does not want someone else to care for them, so you can't get a break, or doesn't want you talking about them because you can't cope. I mean, I get that. For us, it doesn't matter. My daughter is none the wiser. But for lots of people, that's a tricky situation to be in, knowing that, say I have a disability and I'm being cared for, knowing that, say, my husband is off talking about how he has to care for me, that's tough, and that puts pressure in as well. So it's being just mindful of all of that. And also, and this links into what I talked about earlier, the I'm fine, and you know what, maybe they are for now, and maybe they're not, maybe they're very good at, you know, holding it together and putting that smile on, or maybe they're genuinely fine. But either way, knowing that you see them, you've got their back, and you are there, that is a great starting point. So moving on to how do, you know, I've probably scared you now, you know, how on earth do I go and talk to a carer when I could trigger all of that? Well, this is what we say: carefully, sensitively. And I'm guessing that most of the people that are watching this now are in roles where you do work with people in the community, supporting them in some way, and that you are very skilled and used to approaching people in tactful, sensitive and patient manners. And that is what we would say apply to your approach about a carer's conversation. There's no right or wrong way, okay? It's very much down to your judgment, your knowledge of the person. I'm going to bring Suzanne back in again now for just a chat to share, you know, things that go down well. Like you said earlier, ask how they are rather than the person they're caring for. That can be nice. You can throw them a bit. You're like, oh, me. But there are things that, I don't know about you, Suzanne. I was sharing this with the team the other day, how I've got one particular friend and she means well, but the first thing she always says to me is, you look tired. and I might be having, you know, quite a good day, and I immediately go, oh, do I? So, and I probably am tired, and our daughter doesn't sleep well. But the statement is said with the best of intent. It's to say, I know you've had a tough night, but it's interesting. There are things, and I think so. Just having a chat about it brings up some anecdotal thoughts around it.
Yeah. Nobody likes to be told you look tired. You look like you're not coping. You look exhausted. You've got far too much on your plate. It can feel patronizing. It can feel that you're being told you can't cope. You can't multitask. You're not good enough. You look stressed. That can be a sign of, you know, someone might take that as being a sign of, you're telling me I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Other people can do it and not be stressed, but you're telling me I'm stressed. So go really sensitively on that one, and think about what you would like to hear from someone and what would make you open to accessing support. Nobody really likes the word support, and I think a lot of people don't see that they actually need support, and that and so sometimes it's about reframing it. Actually, would it be good to talk to other people like you? Would you like to be part of a community? And like the Mobilise community is very much about give and take. People put in as much as they get out. They share what they've learned so far and what's helped, and they learn from others. Would you like to learn from other carers who've done this before? Would that be helpful? So it's kind of that kind of thing. But the key thing is to listen, start a conversation and listen. And when you understand what are the actual challenges for that person and which are the bits that they're finding hard, then you may be able to sort of direct towards appropriate support. If someone is saying they're lonely, they feel stuck in the house all day, they've not had a conversation with another adult, okay, how would you like to have that conversation with somebody? Do you like chatting to people in groups? Is it about connecting back with your friends? It's not always about, you need a support service, let me direct you to a support service. Yeah. It's about opening up that conversation first. And I think the support that Mobilise offer, one of the lowest levels of support we offer is a daily or weekly email people can choose. And that kind of just is there when they need it. They can read other people's stories. They can find out a little bit of information as they go. And for a lot of people, it's about, well, I'm fine right now. I don't need support. I'm doing okay. I'm loving doing what I'm doing. In fact, Vanessa's there in our comments. She's caring for her husband and she's been out doing shopping for other people as well. She's not saying, it's all too much and I can't cope. She's loving doing that. And it's actually, how are you going to make that sustainable? What's going to come next after that? How long is that going to go on for? And is that okay? So maybe signposting people to the fact they might need support in the future, or that they're doing really well right now. And actually, do they need someone to help them plan for the future as well? So that's where our one-to-one coaching comes in. Is it about what comes next? Now you're doing really well. Well done. But this is going to be really hard to keep going.
Yeah. And actually, I think this is a really good moment for your story, Suzanne, as someone that obviously you're a carer for your husband, but I know that through lockdown, and through church, you have been supporting someone else.
Yeah.
And that's
So
now
at church, we all had one person we had to phone. So then I got a phone call as well. But the lady I've been phoning, she's lovely. She's somebody that used to help look after my children when they were tiny at toddler groups and things like that. So it's lovely to be able to give something back to her. But through lockdown, she's had real physical health problems and challenges. Getting the shopping has been really difficult. She's also caring for her grandson. And life's been really complicated for her. And she's become really dependent on the emotional support of a daily phone call. And so we've had to start to talk about, okay, how long's that going to go on for? You know, when we first set it all up, we thought by the 1st of August, we'd all be back out drinking coffee and getting on with our lives. But it's not the case for her. So we've kind of had to think about, well, what's right for her and what's right for me. And I've had to get some help from another friend with going out and getting shopping, because we're also shielding my husband. And so someone else has been doing little top-up shops for her. So you do it as a bit of a team, that helps. But we need to think about what comes next. You know, I can't wait for the day when she can come round for Sunday lunch and we can do that. But in the meantime, it's about how do we make this sustainable, both for her and for me.
Absolutely. That's a great example. And going back to how to approach these conversations, something you said earlier made me think. There was a line that my mum is my rock, but she would constantly say to me, I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do it. I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do it. And eventually I realized it was actually really unhelpful for me, and would put me in a bit of a bad mood, because I don't really have a choice. And again, said with the best of intentions. Obviously, she's saying I'm doing a great job, except she's saying it in a way that she's reinforcing how hard it all is, I suppose, is ultimately. I had to think why it was bothering me. I thought, well, actually, what you're saying is every time you look at me doing personal care or physio or sensory needs with my daughter, you're thinking, oh my God, that looks like hard work. I'm presupposing on her behalf, but that's what I was reading into it. So telling me that I don't know how you do it all the time was really difficult. But telling me, wow, you do that really well. Can I help? Can you teach me to do it? That would have been the flip side of it, with the same intention. But and everyone is different, and maybe that sentence wouldn't have niggled someone else, but the people that you work with, and I know that you can choose the right words. But hopefully just having these chats gives you some thoughts and insights as to the kind of things that may or may not work. So I
think that's what carers say. They hate the kind of look, you're doing amazing, well done. And I think that's where the peer support works. Those other carers have got their own stuff they're dealing with. They see it as very day to day, but they recognize the strengths in that person. They see you're really organized. You've really got this down to a T. And they sort of focus on some of the positive stuff. But let's not pretend it's all positive. But they do kind of draw out some of the stuff, which is what keeps us going day to day. That's how we can do it. And I think also just the assumption, when someone says, oh, that must be really hard, it must be really difficult, those messages play into you that, oh, hang on, other people haven't got it this hard. My life is really tough, actually. And that we do that with the intention that that's going to push someone towards support. All it does is make them feel that they're not good enough and they're not doing it very well. So it's careful, be careful about kind of what we're saying to people and what they're hearing from us. Spend more time listening than saying stuff is probably the best thing to do.
I think that's absolutely, yes. Holding a space for them to talk, I think is really important. And actually, if you can get a carer talking, you're doing a really good job, especially if they talk about themselves. Rather than everything else. I know that when people would say to me, how are you? I'm fine. And then I would list everything I'd done, like some kind of, but it was always stuff for my daughter or the kids, or it was never, and that might be a good point to say, and what have you done for yourself? Just to gently ease that in. I think carers struggle to prioritise themselves. So thank you. I think hopefully that was a useful chat. So what we want to move on to, bearing in mind we've talked about approaching carefully with tactful language, but also beware that when you do start to probe and have a carer conversation and ask carer type questions, even when you've done them very well based on, you know, the information we've just shared, that you can still, and you probably almost definitely still be the catalyst for some uncomfortable thoughts and emotions. So we would always say be gentle and be patient. And we're going to talk more about these emotions in a minute, but someone may not be ready to acknowledge their caring role. I mean, they literally might not have thought about it as a caring role. So if you have somehow put that in their mindset, that takes a lot of processing, because that means a lot of different things to different people. If you're caring for your husband or your wife, there's an adjustment, because, well, no, they're my husband, they're my wife. No, to be a carer to them is a very big step emotionally. It's a process. So we would recommend that you just keep present with the people as their thoughts and emotions sort of tumble and meander along, and they come to acceptance eventually for most. So we're going to talk a bit. There's a slide with some of the kind of emotions that you might trigger. So and grief is a big one, and we've been talking about it a lot in our community, and not everyone recognizes it. Again, I can speak from personal experience here that I now know I had a huge challenge with grief, but I didn't recognize it as grief, or I wouldn't allow myself to recognize it as grief. My daughter had a huge regression when she was around about 3 years old, and she lost her speech, and her she couldn't look us in the eye. She had to be in a different room to us. She wouldn't play, and this went on for years. And we had hearing test after hearing test. I knew it wasn't her hearing, and she was later diagnosed with autism. But we had lost the little girl that we had, and but even now it feels wrong to say I grieved that child when I got my daughter. But it is a grief. It is a grief for the child that we had, and the interaction that I had with her, the games we would play, the talking she was learning to do, and probably some grief for the future you didn't even know you'd thought about, but have now lost. You know, it's strange to grieve something you never had. But I'm just raising it because this comes up over and over again. When people are supporting perhaps a parent with dementia, there's a lot of grief of the loss of the relationship, and anticipatory grief of what's coming ahead. And the changing of the roles, you go from daughter or son to almost a parent carer role. There can be some anger and resentment triggered, overwhelm when someone has finally got you to sit and think and realize everything that's on your plate that you've been nicely blocking up with your I'm fine. Anxiety, the worry. There's not just, let's remind ourselves actually, it's not just the caring role that you are doing. You are quite honestly, in all probability, fighting for access to services and to keep services, managing medical appointments, managing medication. There's a lot going on. And, I'm a parent carer. For me, it's all about the EHCP, the Education and Healthcare Plan, the amount of effort, energy to get that to meet my daughter's needs, to in and fro in, and getting evidence letters and so on, only to then get it, you receive it back and you have to read it with a fine tooth comb to check everything's in there, and then you spot something that isn't and you have to go back, and the to and froing, and that is the same at every stage of life for carers. The paperwork and the burden of proof that is on you to prove the amount of care that is needed. And if you haven't fully accepted your caring role here, you're probably not accessing all the support that the person you are supporting needs and will benefit from. There'll be some denial in there, quite honestly, and we've talked about the mental health statistics. There'll be depression. There will be exhaustion. I mean, proper sort of adrenal burnout, fatigue. A lot of carers in our community have ongoing health conditions themselves now, brought on from running on cortisol, the stress hormone, for so many years. There's lots of chronic fatigue syndrome and various other chronic illnesses that make caring even harder. And there will be some resistance. And you may experience a lot of resistance from people initially. And that's why we come back to the stay patient, stay present, and stay talking, holding that space for them to talk to you. It's really important. And also just to say that the carers, like I said at the beginning, may not recognize these emotions initially, and you may be opening a bit of a Pandora's box, but it's going to burst at some point. So the earlier we can start having these conversations, the better. So thank you. I mean, what I want to talk about now, I'll bring Suzanne back on, is to encourage questions again. I can't see the questions in my feed, so I hope I'm answering them. But like I say, we can follow up with emails. And what we want to talk about now is just so you're aware of what Mobilise is doing and how we may be able to help, depending on the needs of the people that you are thinking of right now. That actually, that sounds like Bob, that sounds like Doris, that sounds like Jean, and now's the time to be having those conversations with them. So we wanted to talk through the types of support that we can offer. And obviously, as Suzanne mentioned earlier, Camden Carers Service do an amazing job and are there physically on the ground. But what we have are a lot of other accessible tools that may suit other people. We're working very much together on this. So you will know intuitively, I think, where is the best place for someone you're supporting to go. And I know from working with a lot of organisations on the ground that while carers may not be your primary focus, the fact that you've signed up for the webinar today and have been engaging with me, you are very key. Support is support. And if the person you're supporting is reliant on a carer, then that's really important to the support that you provide. So Suzanne's back. Suzanne is head of carer support, so the best person to talk about this. So I'll hand over to you, Suzanne, just to talk a bit about the type of support that we offer here.
Sure. So one of the easiest things people to get started with is a short email course for those that are new to caring, or they may have been caring for a while, but maybe new to seeing themselves as a carer. And it really just kind of drip feeds, covers the basics, all those things that if you could have 5 minutes with a carer and tell them everything you wanted them to do, that it would do. So it would introduce them to the Mobilise community, Facebook group, virtual cuppas, and the idea of peer support and why it can be helpful. It will tell them to do very practical things like let their GP know that they're caring, and if they're working, let their employer know that they're caring and find out what's available there. And just kind of introduce them to the idea of, well, what about the benefits? Have you looked at carers allowance? Is that applicable for you? What about having a carers assessment? So it kind of starts to open up the journey of what's available for them as a carer, as well as some kind of great resources around supporting their mental health and supporting them to keep good mental health. We're not counsellors, we're not therapists, but we've got lots of resources and tools to help with supporting good mental health and keeping well there. The one-to-one support calls. Now, this can be somebody that's just got a question. They're sick of Googling stuff online and trying to work stuff out. They just want to talk to a human being and work something through. The approach we take is that rather than saying, right, this is your answer, this is what you must do, these are your next steps, write this down. Our approach is very much about listening to them, letting them offload a little bit and understanding where they're at, finding out what's actually important to them, and just looking at what might the first steps be and letting them choose those and setting up with us if they want to, check back in with us, book another call when they're ready for the next step. So it breaks things down. It cuts out some of the overwhelm. And in these calls, just in half an hour, we always ask people at the beginning, give me one word to tell me how you're feeling today. Exhausted or overwhelmed is not unusual. And at the end, we ask the same question. And quite often it's like, I feel clearer. I feel lighter. Someone said to me the other day, I feel floaty, that they were able to see over the problem and were able to sort of analyse what needed doing and had lost that tension in their shoulders around it. So just in half an hour.
And actually,
you've been doing some calls.
Yeah, I was going to say, and actually on the support call front, and I mentioned this for those, particularly for those of you that are supporting people where English isn't the first language. I did just such a lovely support call last week with a guy that spoke Mandarin, and he had a family member translating between us. And what you think might have been quite an awkward, clunky process was really positive. We had some laughs in there and a plan at the end. And what we should add is that if anyone would like to bring support to a virtual cuppa or to a one-to-one call, either for language barriers or for just confidence, this is absolutely fine and has happened on numerous occasions. So people bringing a friend to the cuppa the first time because they were nervous, people bringing a friend to translate on a call. So it's just important that we make you aware of that, depending on who you are working with in the community.
Yeah, bring a buddy is really helpful. The Stroke Association have been great at that, actually. Quite often the key workers will set up for the carer that needs some support to come on a cuppa, and they'll come on with them for the first time, just like taking them to the community centre or walking in the room with them. Amazing. They'll do it with them, which is ideal, and that's a really lovely way of working. So we're kind of learning about what works and feeding that back. Really.
Definitely, and it reminds me of an anecdotal story of two of the carers who come on our cuppas, and one of them was having big anxiety about going outside, wasn't she? And one of the other carers offered to be on the phone when she did it, because they couldn't obviously meet virtually, and they don't know each other outside of the virtual cuppas, but she spoke on the phone and talked her through going out on her first walk, and that was wonderful. So having bringing your own support or key worker, if it it doesn't have to be a family or a friend, it could be you listening today, coming along with them for the first time. So it's that first step can feel insurmountable, but it's not.
Yeah. And it's really important that obviously we're signposting people to local resources, local communities. So part of Claire's work with you guys getting to know what you're doing and who you're supporting, it goes two ways. It's, can you help us to find more carers, but also can we send people to you when the time's right and it looks like you have something that will be really valuable for them as well, and make that introduction. So we're building up this kind of resource and this network of what's going on in the local area. And then what carers do is they tell us what works. They feed back and tell us, I went along, it was really easy, or I did this, or I spoke to this person and this is how it felt for me. So we can add to that, and we can add those kind of testimonies. The carers tell us this helps. And that's much more powerful than Suzanne saying this helps. It's someone else in your local area says this helps. And that's really powerful. So that's kind of, we're in that phase of really starting to build up that local intelligence now, and gathering that. We've also got lots of online tools as well. So there's a quick carers allowance checker, a blue badge checker that just saves you trying to work through the government website and work it all out for yourself. Not everybody even wants to phone someone. They want to, in the middle of the night, have a quick look at this and find, make a bit of progress with something. So they can use those quick little tools that just give them a quick reply and put them in touch with us so that we know what their needs are, what it is they're thinking about, and what's next on their little action plan. So we're developing more of those really based on what we see that carers need and what's most helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, by carers for carers, and a lot of the support and information that goes back out has come direct from our community. It's a lovely model. I love it. the advice and input we get from the carers in our Facebook group and in the cuppas, it's fantastic. We have a whole thread at the moment about grief in the group, and we have uplifting posts as well. But it's important to obviously acknowledge all facets of caring, and it's been an incredibly supportive thread. There's a few more posts I need to catch up on, but it's in the private group, not on the main Facebook page. But I think it's quite cathartic to discuss it.
I think that co-learning is really key to healing. And also, as you mentioned, uplift. You know, it's been a really tough few months, isn't it, for everybody? Caring can be really tough, but if we keep the language around it's tough, it's grim, it's miserable, that just brings us all down. So whilst we acknowledge that and accept it, have a safe place to talk about that stuff, there's always a moment of uplift. There's what can we laugh about? And actually some of the tougher cuppas where people are sharing the hard stuff is where sometimes in the end they end up having a good giggle as well. We do our Friday afternoon cuppas is Fantastic Friday. So if you don't want fun, then fine, don't join. There's lots of other cuppas. But we do a daft little, one of the carers will come up with a quick little quiz, or we'll do a daft little challenge or scavenger hunt or something really quick and easy, but that just is guaranteed to get a bit of a giggle out of people. And I think that's really one of the key things that's so important at the moment, to have a little bit of fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne. So we're almost there, really. I guess what's next? For anyone who's watching that's signed up through Eventbrite, we have your email, so we will respond to any questions that have come in and just follow up with you. Anyone that's watching on the live stream, you can drop us an email at info@mobilizeonline.co.uk, which is just scrolling at the bottom, and you can pick up with us there. The videos will be available on Facebook and YouTube. And it's just to say a really big thank you to everybody that has taken the time today to listen to myself and Suzanne, find out more about carers, and, you know, grow your awareness of who they are, where they are, and why they are so awesome and may need our help. And so thank you very, very much, and stay in touch. I know I'm in contact with a lot of you already, and yeah, we will send all out, as I say, anyone who signed up through Eventbrite will get an email, and all the different ways to get in touch with us and access our services. We'll include links to that on the email too. And for anyone else, drop us an email at info@mobilizeonline.co.uk, or just pop on our website and you can see all the various services and support that is available. So thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everybody. Thank
you, Suzanne.